The Royal Bafokeng Nation, an example of a successful wealthy kingship or a perpetuation of colonial-style conquest against defenceless communities.
The only type of African group which colonial policy would recognise as having any kind of legitimacy was the tribe itself.
Every household used to have some cattle, some millet bags stored in the reservoir bags here. Nobody was starving in those times.
Kgosi Molwane had a big vision for his people, for his community. We were starting for the first time to work as the council, and he was looking for information everywhere to empower us.
We need to make sure that our people and their communities are benefiting from mineral resources, are benefiting from the land that their forefathers left them.
This area is part of the Platinum Belt, responsible for 80% of the world's platinum output. The mineral lies beneath land claimed by the Royal Bafokeng Nation. At the head of the nation is King Leruo Molotlehi. Inaugurated in 2003, he is the 36th direct descendant in his family. The royal family's public profile has them sharing the limelight with the wealthy, famous and political elite. The village of Bafokeng in the northwest is home to the royal family. The Queen Mother, Semani Molotlehi, a feature of the charity circuit, is known to be involved in Royal Bafokeng governance behind the scenes. A relatively small town, Bafokeng boasts the world-class Royal Bafokeng Stadium, home to the football league team the Platinum Stars, a state-of-the-art and fully equipped emergency response centre, a modern clinic and civic centre. The public's perception of the Royal Bafokeng Nation as incredibly wealthy is not unfounded. Royal Bafokeng Holdings, its investment arm, has a diversified portfolio of which mining accounts for just over 14%. Its asset worth is $4 billion. Recently, Royal Bafokeng Holdings was awarded a 15% procurement stake in a partnership to supply the Department of Energy with power as an independent producer. On its website, Royal Bafokeng Holdings describes itself as an investment that creates intergenerational wealth for the 100,000 people that comprise the nation, written up as the beneficiaries of its trust. I went to meet King Molotlehi's Royal Bafokeng Nation, a largely impoverished community with a high rate of unemployment. They claim they receive no benefit from the mining on their land and are engaged in a bitter land battle with the king. Gavin Capps, an academic who did his PhD on the Bafokeng, explains how land was purchased by this community under colonial rule and during apartheid.
After 1880, any group which wants to buy land can now only do that through the intermediation of a recognised chief. You don't have to go through missionaries or white nominees anymore, but the first restraint was that the land which is purchased must be initially registered to a state official who would take trusteeship of that land. But secondly, that would then be registered in trust for a local group. But the only type of African group which colonial policy would recognise as having any kind of legitimacy was the tribe itself.
Gesh Nape describes how his ancestors came to settle in the area in the early 1800s.
My ancestor Nape was the first man who established the so-called Bafokeng. After the battles of the Mafatanis, when all the other people were fighting because of the Zulus, the Bafokeng here came to this place here called Tekwana, and they were named after this Bafokeng Ba Tekwana.
If you start peeling away the layers of the Bafokeng, as indeed any of the chiefdoms around this area, what you find is that they're actually composites of diverse groups, which kind of got stirred up at the beginning of the 19th century with the Bafokeng, a period of wars and migrations, and Zilikazi passed through this area and smashed up a lot of already existing Swana polities.
Tusi Rapo is a community activist whose family has lived in the area for over 2 centuries.
Communities which had settled in the Rustenburg area long before the 1800s were forced to subscribe to one chief. At the time, the forefather of the current Bafokeng chief, who had befriended Paul Kruger there.
Paul Kruger was then field coronet in the Afrikaner-controlled Republic of Transvaal.
The Afrikaners would provide political and military protection and backing for local leaders and allow them to have a privileged place in the local hunting economy. And in return, these leaders, who would be elevated above other groups, would be supplying labour actually to Afrikaners and Afrikaner farmers. The Bafokeng chief Mogatle was involved in mobilising men for slaving expeditions under the Afrikaners and for hunting down runaway slaves. That's quite well documented.
The area was divided up into farms and distributed amongst the Afrikaners.
The whole area was carved up as private property, with the African groups and people already living on it, and these were then converted into a tenantry, a fairly servile tenantry of the Afrikaner landlords who had ended up in control of that land.
From the 1860s, Afrikaner farmers began selling their land. The original landowners formed syndicates to buy it back. In 1870, the farmer who owned Ntate Nape's community's land wanted to sell it.
He told them that he wants 180 pounds, which was equivalent to 70 heads of cattle. Then the men came together and collected the cattle and gave it over to Van Rensburg.
Each family individual contributed to making it possible to buy the lands in the form of contributing cattle or sometimes money-wise.
Ntate Mekgwe still holds on to the records as proof of land purchased by his community. In 1907, 2 communities contested a court ruling that their land be registered in trust to the Minister of Native Affairs under King August Mogatle and his tribe.
The 2 communities lost the case in 1907 on account that a section of a tribe cannot hold land in title separate from the tribe, despite proof that it is the section of the tribe that bought separately from the whole tribe.
That same year, work began on building a railway line, which would later serve as what would become the epicenter of mining in the area.
The construction company came in without consulting the land buyers, the owners of this land. They asked them who had given them permission to construct a railway line on their land. They said the chief at Bafokeng gave them permission.
Mining took off in the early 1930s after German geologist Hans Merensky traced a platinum reef in the area that houses 80% of the world's platinum group metals.
In the Rustenburg area, there were communities which were settled here, which were largely agricultural communities.
Every household used to have some cattle, some mealies bags stored in the reservoir bags here. Nobody was starving in those times. I used to have vegetables, every type of vegetable. And as you can see, I used to sell this little.
Piri Shimani shows me a crater in his village blasted open by the mine over 20 years ago. He says it has been a hazard ever since. A child drowned here, but he says the mining companies have done nothing to secure it. It's a matter of time before this unmarked gravesite is completely engulfed by the surrounding mine. According to the Mining Charter of 2010, mining companies have to consult with communities before implementing mining projects. They also have to meaningfully contribute to uplifting the communities, including, where possible, employing people from within the area.
You are really the buyers. The prospecting rights. Re tlo tlhoma mine fana or anything se ba ka se tlhoma gore re tlo tlhoma so se fana o tswana le dikwari re tlo ira dikwari bjana le bjana re ba tlo re libitse re engage re bua ka so sena gore re tlo ira bjana what's the profit thereafter dio te di tswana le tse. We benefit absolutely nothing. You can just see the difference between this village and the Bafokeng.
When the communities complained to the Department of Minerals and Resources, when they complained to Impala Platinum Mines, they are then referred back to the traditional leadership, to the chief.
While both the Department of Mineral Resources and Impala Platinum say they consult with communities through the King, their legal representative, Impala insists it has no jurisdiction over these matters. Residents showed me the Luka Dam and said the water being pumped into it is wastewater from the mines. Community members buy filtered water to counter the water from the taps, which they say is polluted and smells bad.
There are areas where you find that the water is just of poor quality. So I am bottling water here. I see, what comes from the water that comes through the tap. I have to change filters almost every 3 weeks, but sometimes 2 weeks the filters are done because they get blocked by the mud that is coming from the water.
The Federation for a Sustainable Environment says from mining, the water is high in nitrates, which have a cumulative effect on health. Many youth in the area say they are bored and frustrated with the lack of opportunities available to them.
Some of us, we start drinking. If we want to do something, we drink, we smoke. There's nothing that's happening in our village. We want development in our village because of since I was born, I've been living in the same situation my father was living, or my sisters, whoever, my elders. I have qualifications to that I can make something out of my life.
Residents say they have been severely impacted by mining so close to their homes.
In around 1999, when I came back home from my studies, there was open cast mining taking place in around Luka. It was the worst of its kind, less than 2 kilometers from residential stands within the Luka community.
One day, 4 people came with 4x4 car. So they just find my mother still plowing. She was frightened. Only found it was people from Bafokeng just to prospect there, to inspect there where this guide for the aeroplanes will be inserted. And since that day, we never get complete compensation.
While Mayor Moteni was showing me the structures erected on her land without her consultation, a security guard approached us wanting to know what we were doing on the land.
What is happening in my field? Because I see somebody or security which without...
Mining prospecting continues with the expansion of mining operations. This man has no choice but to put up with this machine looking for minerals in his backyard. In 2002, the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act allowed landowners to become investors.
To convert an existing royalty stream into a direct equity stake, so you actually become an owner in the mine yourself. And the Bafokeng very much pioneered that route. It would also make a very big difference if at that point you can consolidate your control of the land and how you hold it.
In 2008, the Bafokeng king, without consulting the Bafokeng communities, approached the court to have all the land with the Bafokeng Nation appearing on the title deed in trust to be transferred to the Royal Bafokeng Nation.
So a court order was passed down to the Royal Bafokeng that they actually had to advertise that this was what they were wanting to do. So it appeared in a local paper, people picked it up here, and suddenly it came as a tremendous shock.
We were left only with 10 days, so that if there's no intervention, so the commissioner now write all the land under Kosi.
29 communities whose predecessors had bought the land formed the Bafokeng Land Buyers Association to contest the King's appeal to have their 61 farms registered under the Royal Bafokeng Nation.
Many people went to claim their lands, their properties. And then we decided to form one association with other groups who were in the similar situation as we are, claiming their lands.
The communities that we represent say that in terms of the customary law that they follow, the Bafokeng and the broader Tswana customary law, deep consultation is required when important decisions are made, in particular decisions about land. The Bafokeng, on the other hand, have started to follow a kind of quasi-customary commercial model wherein they take commercial decisions on behalf of the tribe, as they call them, without any real consultation.
The Legal Resources Centre lodged a case within the King's case, questioning his authority to approach the courts without consulting the communities.
The Northwest High Court found in that application that indeed the Kgoshi did not consult, or the Supreme Council did not consult in making this very important decision as to the ownership of the land of all the people. And yet the court said that the Kgoshi has the ultimate prerogative to decide what he wants to consult on. Now, we are quite sure that that's not in line with the Constitution, and even not in line with the customary law of the Tswana and the Bafokeng people.
Leave to appeal was granted and will be heard in front of a full bench of the Northwest High Court. The communities say the consequences for taking a stand against the Royal Bafokeng administration lead to bullying and intimidation through the use of strong-arm tactics by the administration and its security company.
If communities wanted to raise issues, service delivery issues, raise issues against maladministration or mismanagement within the traditional leadership structure, within the Royal Bafokeng Nation, such dissent, is oppressed.
The community of Tsitsing says it's facing forced removals for allocating community land to families, a practice they have continued for generations. They believe this is a result of their dispute with the king over the ownership of land.
Our people got evictions letter from the High Court of Mafike. We are just amazed by the actions of the Royal Bafokeng to come into our space and issuing letter of evictions.
They go with a bulldozer to the stand that is given to one of our members of Bafokeng Holdings. So we try to communicate directly with Khosi, but at the end, he never listened to us. He say when we want to talk about the land claim, we must go to the land affairs for the answer. If you come from the area where I'm coming, Luka, Pirin, you are not going to be heard.
Well, they've removed the headman of Tekwana because he was in support of the land claim, and installed a different headman, and they're refusing to retract that, even though it's unlawful.
The Tekwana community says the chief was abducted, put in an aged home against his will, and heavily medicated. They have taken legal action against the king. The chief is currently in hiding.
Nna ke na le ngongorego e tona thata ba ke la kgaitsadi ake wa tseiwang ke Bafokeng phana se molatlhela kwa aba a ratang teng a molatlhela gore motho o mo tshwareletseng ona e be ene biano o mo tsere makgetlo a 5.
Sina Motsialwa worked in the Bafokeng administration from 1995 to 2000 under King Molwane Molotlehi. She recalls the harmonious relationship he had with the communities.
Kgosi Molwane had a big vision for his people, for his community. We were starting for the first time to work as the council, and he was looking for information everywhere to empower us, to teach us what is it that he wants to see happening in his villages. Everybody was involved. He said, Kgosi is not bigger than Makgotla. If Makgotla take a decision, he cannot outrule it as a king.
King Molotlehi was unable to meet me to respond to the community's allegations and referred me to Advocate Mokaete.
That land is the Bafokeng land, which was jointly purchased by all Bafokeng. We want to transact and make decisions on our own. That is why we want our land back in our name. The Khosi cannot own the land. The land must be in the name of Royal Bafokeng, including the claimants. Some of them their ancestors were original members of Royal Bafokeng. So to claim that they are a separate nation elsewhere is delusional. The mines did not encroach on anybody's farming land, because our policy is that if the mine were to encroach on your farming land, we would give you an alternative piece of land for farming. People moved away from their plowing fields to go and get employment in the urban areas.
I asked why the communities, the supposed beneficiaries of Royal Bafokeng's investments, do not benefit from them.
Royal Bafokeng Holdings gives the money to Royal Bafokeng Nation for it to budget for its service delivery. Anybody who claims that they are not beneficiaries of that process, they are misleading, because all services which are rendered on Bafokeng land have not been rendered by the municipality or the government. They always have been rendered by the Royal Bafokeng Nation.
When I brought up the issue of water pollution in the area, Advocate Mokate's answer revealed the distance between the administration and its communities.
The issue of water pollution, as you mentioned it, hasn't come to our attention. We will go and check it, because it's also a concern to us if there is any water pollution which is going out of control.
But why is the Tsitsing community facing forced evictions, and why have they been victim to the random bulldozing of houses built on their land?
They have transgressed the rules and want to allocate themselves stands, and we cannot have that disorder. That is why we approach the court to interdict them.
Not being an elected body, the Bafokeng administration has usurped many functions of government with little focus on democratic processes. Dr. Elmi Castleman says that despite its investments, the Royal Bafokeng Nation is not wealthy.
The fact that the Bafokeng has an asset portfolio to approximately the value of 30 billion rand doesn't make us rich. If we take that 30 billion rand and we were to distribute it, it calculates to approximately 100,000 rand. But first, how long will it take us to build up an asset portfolio again to be sustainable in the services we render to the community?
Dr. Castleman says they are addressing youth unemployment.
30% of our community that's supposed to work are unemployed. That's why we started with further education and training colleges, and we have currently approximately 1,000 students absorbed in nursing, hospitality, construction and engineering.
Many mine hosting communities receive no benefit from the mining on their land. Analyst Kuseni Tlamini says this alienates communities.
They're actually viewed as an example of how other traditional communities and tribes should organize their affairs, should focus on development, and should have a deliberate developmental philosophy. We need to make sure that our people and their communities are benefiting from mineral resources, are benefiting from the land that their forefathers left them. We need to make sure that people are not alienated. The historical legacy of colonialism and apartheid, where people felt alienated from their own land, from their own natural resources, is something that the new South Africa cannot afford.
As a new day dawns, the unrelenting communities share the conviction that though the wheels of justice turn slowly, they will get their land back.